Hello YouTube. It's been 2 weeks since I first sat down here on this couch and recorded a video about my detransition, which I uploaded on YouTube on Sunday 2 weeks ago. And some time has passed, and I started to thinking to myself, well, maybe I should make a sequel to that video, and let's hope it'll be a sequel like Terminator 2 rather than Troll 2, because that would be an absolute disaster. Oh my god! I have received so many lovely comments from so many of you, and just as a note, if you're one of those who send me those lovely comments, know that you are not just my viewer, you're not just my subscriber, you are my friend. And I hope you don't mind if I call you that. Is that okay? Great. Some of you commented that you hope I'm doing better right now, or expressed concern about my well-being, or perhaps that, well, my story was sad or heartbreaking. So I'm sitting here letting you know that I'm doing really, really good. I probably haven't been this, well, happy. I guess you could say I do experience joy in my life. I do live a meaningful and fulfilling life. And I think that living a meaningful and fulfilling life is much more important than simply being happy. And, well, happiness happens as a result if you live a meaningful life. So I'm doing really, really well. I probably haven't been on this level of my well-being probably since I was a kid. Like, if you've watched my detransition video, you know that things totally collapsed and crashed for me in my teenage years, when bullying first happened, and then the transition and everything that followed. Well, my dreams were sort of killed for a long time. And if none of that happened, I don't know where will I be today, what I would have achieved by now. But I mean, I don't think there's much point dwelling on that, really, because I have been given a new chance of life, which I appreciate. I appreciate the experiences I had so far, even though some of them were, well, quite painful, really. But it certainly helps build a character, and I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for those experiences. So, in a weird way, I guess I am grateful for what happened. The reason why I'm making this video is because, well, I think the previous one was focusing so much on the negative aspects. You know, it's all doom and gloom. But truth is, well, there's much more to life than that. So I want to end it on a more positive note. But if I would make one video out of it, it will be like probably 3 hours long, yeah, and I don't think any of you would have the patience to watch that, and honestly, you probably have much better things to do in your life than listening to me, right? And I mentioned in my first video that there really is no going back to normal after what happened, and yeah, of course, I mean, that is true. Your life is forever changed, you can't erase that, but just because things are different doesn't necessarily mean they have to be bad. And perhaps for a long time, or at least a while, it may seem that things are gonna be a little tough. Long time it may seem that there is no hope. But somewhere at the end of that long, dark tunnel, there is a light. And I'm not sure if I can, but I will try to help you get there if possible. In the early process of detransitioning, it is quite common to build up a significant amount of regret and perhaps shame. And shame never actually helps when it comes to any sort of healing process, any sort of acceptance you need to develop. And you may ask yourself questions like, will my body ever go back to normal? How do I deal with potential side effects from hormones or complications from surgery? How do I deal with regret and shame? How do I deal with mental health after the transition process? I find those to be very commonly asked questions when going through what I went through. And so I want to address all of them individually. So, will your body ever go back to normal? Well, there is no simple way to answer that with a simple answer like yes or no. It really depends on multiple factors, like, well, how far in the process were you? If you transitioned only socially, that is not a relevant question for you at all. Now, if you've ended up taking puberty blockers as a teenager in your adolescence, or I would say most of the effects will be fully reversible. Your fertility might be at risk, and there are some other side effects related to your health that are not fully explored or explained by doctors, etc. And of course, we can't forget just how important role puberty plays in the development of one's brain. We do need more research to fully understand just how much of a role do those hormones play in one's development, mental development, because I don't think it's ever a good idea to fill your body with cross-sex hormones when your body produces natural hormones that it requires for proper development. But when we're talking about secondary sex characteristics, you should be probably fine if puberty blockers is as far as you went. Now, as for the prolonged usage of estrogen or testosterone, well, testosterone is much harder to reverse than estrogen. It's a much more stronger, potent hormone, and but then again, you know, look at some of the transitioners on YouTube or other type of social media. I personally call it anti-social media, and you'll see that they are capable of looking like women after prolonged use of testosterone. So it's not the end of the world, but it takes time to reverse those effects. Yeah. However, you know, some of those changes that may happen to you when taking cross-sex hormones are definitely irreversible. And we're not talking just about secondary sex characteristics. We're also talking about changes to your brain and perhaps some damage done to your health, which can happen. And if you've used those hormones for several years, it's almost guaranteed that some damage to your health will be done. If you've used it for like a year, maybe two, well, the prognosis is quite good, so you probably don't have to worry about that. And when it comes to secondary sex characteristics, well, how reversible is it? Depends. If you've done bottom surgery, it will be much harder to reverse those effects because your body is not going to be producing enough of your natural sex hormone to counteract those effects. But it's still possible. I'm I'm not on testosterone, but I did see my body becoming less feminized as I stopped taking estrogen, and I see those changes happening with every single year. So it's possible to do that. Now, when it comes to surgeries, yeah, that's where things get a little complicated, and I think that's where a lot of regret and shame can come from. Because even if you do end up either feminizing or masculinizing your body after detransitioning, there's this one part of you that cannot be changed no matter what. And I mean, yeah, those surgeries exist that can sort of help you fully detransition, but honestly, it's not worth it. So the lesson to learn here is to just accept yourself as you are. You've made a mistake, you have to live with it, just own it. Because those surgeries that can offer recreation of penis or vagina are not very good. And consider this, right? Now you are living with something that is fake. And when out of that fake material you're trying to create something real, you're gonna end up with something even more fake. Is that what you want? Probably not. So I would recommend to just leave things as they are. And then there are complications. Well, complications can definitely make it much more difficult to learn to accept where you are, especially if those complications follow you for several years. Some are just very short term, and it'll be probably much easier to deal with, even though the experience might be traumatic. But if you've had long-term complications, whatever they might be, that sort of becomes part of your everyday life, and it will always remind you of that. You cannot escape it. So how do you learn to function at that point? Well, it's like with any other kind of injury, right? You eventually learn to adapt, and that's the thing about humans. We are very, very adaptable. We are probably one of the most adaptable creatures on this planet. Now, if you feel that your life is ruined after you've made that decision, that you can probably never feel happy again, well, here are my thoughts on happiness. Because I don't think happiness is the end goal. You see, when I was living as a trans woman, I would certainly say that I felt happy in that moment. Well, based on that testimony, you would say, well, I was doing well. The answer is, well, not really. Ask any former alcoholic, or, well, technically you never actually stop being an alcoholic, but you get my point, right? Like, ask any former alcoholic if they felt happy at first when they started drinking, pausing every day. You probably had time of your life. You might be looking fondly at those memories. You might think of it as good days, good times. But then you realize that you do not want to go back to that, because in the long run, that wasn't good for you. And to me, it's the same with taking those hormones and living as a trans woman. Like I said, I did feel happy. So yeah, I certainly felt happy. But I don't think it's a good idea to get attached to anything temporary. And like I said, happiness is a temporary state. It comes and goes multiple times throughout your life, yeah? But what has more value than happiness It's the truth. The truth is not based on any temporary state, even though truth sometimes can be temporary. Like, for example, it's cold. Well, that sort of truth applies only if it actually is cold. Or Johnny is 4 feet tall, which might be the case when Johnny is a kid, but he will probably grow. In that case, we're talking about temporary truths. But then there is a higher form of truth, which is independent of the temporary. And above that, there's even higher truth than that, which is true under any circumstance in any possible universe. Like, for example, if you have an object A and object B, then either object A will be bigger than object B, or object B will be bigger than object A, or they will always be the same size. Now you have sort of universal truth. Me being a man is perhaps not a universal truth, but it is a truth that is relevant for as long as I'm alive. That is truth that I cannot change. So, what is more fulfilling? Living in a sort of happy lie, that is sort of like a high induced by drugs, or living a fulfilled life by accepting myself. And I don't know about you, but to me option B sounds much more reasonable, because truth triumphs temporary happiness, and living in accordance with that truth can lead to something with a much higher value than temporary happiness. Aristotle he wrote down about a term called eudaimonia, which sometimes gets translated as happiness, but in reality it's much more than that. It is a sort of the fulfillment. It's living to your higher purpose by exercising your reason. And like I said before, I think if you live a fulfilling, meaningful life, that will automatically also make you happy in the process. So don't chase that happiness by itself, and you will see that will help you deal with any sort of situation. My second advice is that, well, if depression hits you after you detransition, just let it happen, let it run its course. Yeah. People react differently. Some will be overwhelmed by the process from the very start. I mean, not surprising. It's quite a shock to your brain and your body if you change your sex, either socially or hormonally, 2 times. I mean, it's a shock if it happens once. If you go for that 2 times, it's like getting hit by a truck. Yeah. So, whereas others like me, I just want to move on with their life and pretend like it didn't happen, and that is the worst thing you can possibly do. Because I ended up just continuing just like that. I was studying, I was working, sometimes, occupying myself with projects like music and things like that. But on the surface, it's like absolutely calm water, yeah. But underneath it was boiling. And in 2018, I would get really bad seizures that were caused by all this stress, all those negative emotions that I tried to bury underneath. And I was taking certain drugs like painkillers and antipsychotics to try and calm all of that down. I was suppressing it, I was burying it down, and once it explodes, it's going to be much worse than if you were to deal with it from the start. So just allow yourself to feel it. Allow yourself to experience this pain. Let it do its job, because it's a very important part of healing. That's the same thing I would say to anyone who's going through any sort of grief or tragedy in your personal life, like losing your spouse. Just feel it from the start. Let it do its job. It's a natural reaction. By suppressing it, you're only delaying the inevitable. And once it hits you, it's going to hit you so much harder. So yeah, don't be stupid, don't be me, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Because you see, all of those emotions, they will accumulate. And once they reach that point where you just can't hold it in anymore, it's all gonna come out, it's gonna be nasty. So, at the time period from 2019 to 2021, I just ended up spiraling down the pit of despair. I hit the rock bottom, and it was hard to climb out of there. And eventually you start to feel comfortable when you're there, yeah? It's like, well, why should I climb out of this hole and be up there and be a nobody when I can become the king of this my own hole that I end up digging up? And that's the worst possible thing you can think of, because you are excusing your own misery, you're bathing in it. It's like having a lot of dirt on your body and just going into a bathtub and then you're laying in your dirt. You're not really washing your own body, you're just bathing in your own dirt. And that's basically what I was doing. I tried going to therapy, but that never actually helped much, and I've also mentioned it in my first video that therapists were not very interested in talking about these things at all. They had no idea what they were doing or how to treat someone like me. I would say that some of the Jordan Peterson videos I stumbled upon on YouTube helped me more than the actual therapy sessions. And I think there's some deeper truth when he says such a simple phrase:
clean up your room. That's a good start.
This here is my room when I ended up hitting a rock bottom. This here is my room when I finally got better. What I found out helped me a lot in the process was first of all, being out in the nature, feeling as one with the world around me, and as a human, which is a creature of reason, you could say, some of us, it's so easy to feel that we are something separate from the natural world around us. We view culture and technology as something separate from the nature, whereas it's all really a part of it. We are a part of it. I ended up engaging in meditation. For a while, I started meditating several times a week. One thing you may struggle with after you detransition is your sense of self. The great question of, well, who am I really? And after you found yourself making such a horrible mistake, you might think, well, how can I ever trust myself? Or how can I ever trust my judgment? I'm not a very emotional person. And what I mean by that is that I am a sensitive person, but I am not an emotional person. And there is a huge difference, because an emotional person is a person who thinks with their feelings or bases their decision making on their feelings, and that is not me. I do know it very well that you should never use your feelings when it comes to decision making. But then again, can you trust your reasonable judgment as well? When I first decided I wanted to be a woman, that was a decision I reasonably justified for myself. So if I can't trust that, well, what can I trust? This led me to developing even more interest in philosophy of mind. I started stripping away all the cultural aspects that seemingly made me who I am, at least on the surface. Eventually, to the point where I became culturally homeless. But even then, I realized that there are temporary chemical states that affect my mind and affect my thinking as well as my desires. And on top of that, there are personality traits that act as a catalyst of sorts, a predisposition for the way I act and think and feel. But what if there's a deeper me underneath all that? So I was contemplating a lot. I was meditating and spending more time in nature. And the conclusion I arrived at is that I am a spiritual animal, nothing more and nothing less. I am a spiritual animal observing the world around me, the patterns that emerged, guided by natural laws that steer the whole universe just as much as they steer you or me. I am a spiritual animal longing for the divine. I guess you could call what I've went through sort of a ego death. And when I emerged from that, what I realized that I didn't necessarily exist as a subject, but more of as a part of a whole, the bigger picture. Because in modern society doesn't seem to be preoccupied with this sort of contemplation. It promotes an individual that is obsessed with the self rather than letting go of that self. It creates an individual that is based in hedonism, who will rather pursue simple temporary pleasures rather than live in accordance with the truth. And I think letting go of the ego is a necessary part of healing, but also a necessary part of growing. And if I didn't go through that, I would probably be where I started. But it certainly helped me with my depression. And that is not to say that I never feel any symptoms of depression ever, because it always comes back in one form or another. But the change that happened is that now I'm equipped to deal with that. So in the process I became a much better functioning member of society, even though still a weird one. And then something else happened, and I came across a song by Tom Macdonald. And there was any Tom Macdonald's fans watching this video, Hangover Gang forever. But the name of the song was Castles. And to this day, I think this is the best Tom Macdonald song. And that was life-changing. That was the moment I knew I wanted to do something more with my life than just being miserable and depressed.
Got a wheelchair ramp leading up to the door. I can see that you walk just fine. Probably hate it cause it isn't getting used anymore, and you only ever build it for your wife. Everywhere that I walk, see you on the sidewalk, begging for a little loose change for some dope. Probably got a mama and a papa spending everything they make, trying to clean you up enough to take you home. Used to have a good job, used to get good grades, used to have big dreams, and he lost hope. When your girlfriend died, giving birth to your son, you're the father that'll probably never know.
As for dealing with feeling of regret or shame after detransitioning, I would say it takes time, right? Just as any sort of healing process. Be patient. Like, this change doesn't happen overnight. It requires hard work and time. But remember, like, this can happen to anyone, really. And just like any sort of mental illness or even any type of addiction, we are all vulnerable to that. No matter how intelligent you think you are, it can happen to everyone, right? You just happen to be a lucky winner.
Alex.
No.
You've won 100,000.
But what I think is the important lesson to learn here is that if you were able to overcome that, if you were able to face your past traumas or maybe your internalized misogyny or homophobia, and you got to the place where you detransitioned, remember that in and of itself requires a lot of strength. And if you're capable of that, you are capable of so much more. And I think instead of feeling shame, that's actually something to be proud of. Because remember, not everyone who regrets that choice ends up detransitioning. Like, some people can't find the inner strength to do that. And if you are one of those who did, you can congratulate yourself on that, right? So yeah, my final message is, it's not the end of the world. Rebuilding your life is one hell of hard work, and that is something you need to prepare yourself for if you just at the start of that journey. It's not gonna be easy, but if you can get through it, it's definitely going to be worth it, because there are beautiful and wonderful and magnificent and amazing things waiting for you at the end of the rainbow. With that, I will see you next week, and take care of yourself. Ciao.